comes off and stay seated during our speaker. Now please help me enthusiastically welcome our speaker, Moe.
Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Moe N, and I am an alcoholic. And because Alcoholics Anonymous works miracles, I haven't had to have a drink since December 3rd of 2004. And I say that because it is a miracle each and every one of us are here. We should be out there drunk. And I love your t-shirt. Mine would say instant slut, just add alcohol. We become things we never meant to. You know, I mean, gosh, I always wish I could get up here and say, oh, I grew up in all this dysfunction and my parents drank all the time and you know, that's why I am the way I am. But the truth is that is not my story. My parents loved my brother and my sister and I very much. I can probably count on one hand the time I saw both of them put together take a drink, and it was usually one. You know, we were loved. We didn't have a lot of money. We grew up kind of more on the poorer side, but my folks worked hard and they sacrificed a lot to make sure we had everything we needed and as much of what we wanted as they could, and it didn't matter. Alcoholism doesn't care. You know, it looked like my life should have been beautiful. You know, it looked like I should have been just tickled pink to be me. And I hated being me. From my earliest memories, I just remember feeling like I didn't belong. You know, I grew up in very rural Montana. My hometown was about 1,000 people. Of my graduating class of 46, 28 of us started kindergarten together. So, you know, these should have been my bestest friends, and I should have been extremely comfortable with them. You know, I grew up playing in the sandbox with all the boys, but by the time I hit about 13, I couldn't talk to them because, oh my God, puberty hit. You know, it just that constant, the whole time I was growing up feeling like I'm just not as good as you guys are. You know, just spending all of my time trying to figure out how I can make you think I'm good enough. You know, I can remember getting invited to all the birthday parties and slumber parties of the little girls in my class thinking, well, their moms made them invite me. You know, I think something in it becomes the truth. That was not the truth. Their moms didn't make them invite everybody. Christy Hasty never got invited. She had lice all the time. You know, she lived out in the mountains and they always had lice. And so she didn't get invited. So why do I think that these moms made their kids, not all the little girls were being invited. Where do I come up with these ideas? I think them and they become the truth. That's what happens for me. And so, you know, I mean, I was a pretty happy kid. I kept all of that pretty well hidden. All my life, nobody knew I was as uncomfortable as I was, because if I can make you believe I'm okay, then maybe I can feel like I'm okay. And so, you know, I go through grade school just kind of going through the motions. You know, I never felt like anything was spectacular, but nothing was really horrible either. And so then I hit junior high. And you know what happens with most of us when we hit junior high? We find a drink. And God, I needed that drink. I told you I was feeling so uncomfortable around the boys that I knew, let alone the boys I didn't know. And this gal from California had moved to Roundup, Montana. And I have no idea why their parents chose Roundup, Montana, but they did. And so, you know, she was a little more worldly than I was, had a little more experiences than I had. And I'm thinking, oh, somebody new. Somebody who doesn't already know me and know that I'm not good enough. Maybe, you know, so we became best friends, and she was dating this older guy, and one Friday night we end up cruising up and down Main Street, and of course he was old enough to buy beer, and we had a 6-pack, and man, something happened to me. Something absolutely happened to me. I only drank 1.5 beers, but next thing I know, I'm flirting with my best friend's boyfriend, and who knew that would become a theme for me? You know, it just, gosh, if you're going to pay attention to me, I mean, it comes down to make me feel good enough, and so it just got to the point where really all they had to do was pat me on the head and my pants would fall off, and that's what I meant by, add alcohol, I become the slut. It was not a goal. When I wrote out my 10-year, 20-year goals, that was definitely not it. But that's what I became, because if you're going to pay attention to me, then I, for a moment, can feel like I'm good enough. And so, I was not a daily drinker from there on out. In junior high, it's not that easy. But I can guarantee you that every weekend I was finding the party, and every weekend it was on. Because, when I was younger, I was quite a fat little kid. I was smart enough, but I came from a class of brainiacs. I was not even in their league. And, I am not sports inclined. I literally cannot walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. And just not a part of whatever. And so, I take a drink and I lose 40 pounds. And my IQ goes up 40 points, and every girl wants to be me, and every boy wants me. And that's what I'm searching for. And it was fun. Anybody who did not have fun in the beginning of your drinking, you weren't doing it right. Because it was a lot of fun. Who would not enjoy the we get when we take a drink, right? I mean, I am an uptight, just so focused on myself person, and I take a drink and I'm the life of the party. It was fun. So of course I'm going to drink as often as I can. When I get a sense of ease and comfort like that, of course I'm going to drink every chance I can. So when I was 15 years old, I met my first husband. He was 20. He could buy alcohol. He knew where all the big people parties were at, and that always made me feel a little bit better. So, we started doing that dance. We were together for 23 years, ended up having 5 kids, and put each other through hell, really. I mean, we just had no idea how to treat each other. I needed him to treat me like I was the Queen of Sheba just to feel normal, and he couldn't hold up to that. He's human, and he needed me to just be around. And if something else came up more fun or whatever, then I kind of got put on the back burner. It was an ugly dance we did for a long time, but God, I'm grateful we did, because there are 5 amazing humans that came out of that. And so I graduated from high school. Now, I would like to say that I was a good monogamous member of that relationship, but I was not, because something would become more important to him. Well, somebody else would pat me on my head, and the things happen, but it always happened when there was a drink. I was not that type of person when I was sober. That always happened when there was a drink, and so just that ugly dance we did, and so then we start having kids, and God, with each one of those kids, I thought, this is the thing that's going to make me feel complete. And it would for a while. It would for a while, but then that hole would just empty out again. And I spent probably 15 years not drinking very much. My children were a sufficient substitute for a while, but I was restless, irritable, and discontent for those 15 years. And when I did drink, I can guarantee you it was not just one. Because here's the deal. I am restless, irritable, and discontent to where I have to drink. I have this mental obsession that something's got to happen, and I don't even know that mental obsession is going on. I cannot tell you I could have ever, in all my years of drinking, ever said, ooh, a drink makes that feel good. It's just like I instinctively knew, that if I went, and I'm not I'm not one of those people who drinks behind closed doors. I want the bulls, the blood, the guts, the mud. I want the party. I'm at the bar. I'm bellied up to the cocktail waitress station because that's where the bartenders go and you can get drinks faster. I'm just, we have a street in Billings in Billings, Montana, that has all these little bars with their patios and whatnot. And I remember driving down the street and thinking, gosh, would be nice to do that again. And I'm like, what's again? I was never a patio bar drinker. I was bellied up to the bar inside. So, so for those years, my kids, but here's the deal. I still have this obsession. I got to do 6 times as much as you to be as good as you. I just cannot be on this level playing field no matter what. And so my kids join bowling, and I become a bowling coach. And then next thing I know, I've taken over the whole town's youth bowling. And my kids join Girl Scouts, and next thing I know, I'm the service unit manager for Girl Scouts. And my son joins Boy Scouts, and next thing I know, I'm a den mother. And, I cannot just go and enjoy my kids. I end up with a position that I don't even get to watch my kids, and my mom was the most amazing woman I have ever known, and my life goal was always just to be a good wife and a good mom like my mom, and I never, ever felt like I measured up. I remember when I turned 10 years sober, my kids came to hear me do my talk, and so I focused it more on the kids' side of it rather than where it may go tonight. And one of their friends ended up in the rooms, and I had said something about, I just wanted to be a good mom like my mom, but I couldn't pull it off or something like that. And she came up to me afterwards and she says, what do you mean you couldn't pull it off? You were the mom we all wanted. And Earl Hightower talks about, he gets to change his history, or no, it's Sandy Beach maybe. Talks about he gets to change his story because the truth comes out. And, up until that point, I had really beat myself up over the kind of mom I ended up. But that's the thing, I ended up that kind of mom. I wasn't always that kind of mom. I was a good mom for a while until I wasn't. And so I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. I know this is a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am going to talk about drugs because I use drugs to control my drinking. I am an alcoholic through and through, but I can't even tell you how I got here if I don't mention the drugs. So just getting that out of the way. Don't be surprised. Bill and Bob both talked about drugs in their stories in the big book. So, I think as long as we keep it in line with alcohol, how it affected our alcoholism, I don't think that's a bad thing. So at 15, 16 years old, something like that, I got introduced to this little white powder that allows you to drink all weekend long and never puke on anybody's shoes. Amazing stuff. I used it occasionally. 4th of July weekend was always a big thing in Roundup, and it was like an all-class reunion every single year, and so I'd get some then, or just whatever. But it wasn't until So I was fortunate I got to be a stay-at-home mom for a really long time until my youngest ended up in kindergarten, and then it was like, okay, it's time to go back to work. I need some conversation above my knees, and so I ended up getting this job at our little grocery store. I got to work evenings, so we didn't have to have daycare, and I was really good friends with the owner and some of the checkers, and, we'd close down the store at 9 p.m., and we'd go to the cooler and get a 12-pack of beer and sit in back and solve all the problems of the world. And one of my friends also cleaned the bank, and so when we left there, we'd go clean the bank and sit in the break room and drink some more beer, and my drinking really started to progress. My kids didn't need me so much anymore. So that sufficient substitute was going away, and I had to have something. And so then I ended up getting a job at our Catholic church there. I got to be the office manager. Perfect for a mom. I got to take my kids to school, go to work, get off at 3:30, go home, be a mom to my kids. But that's not what happened because my best friend lived right across the street. And I'd go over and we'd sit on her deck and we'd sit and drink beer, and pretty soon my kids would be calling and they'd be like, Mom, are you going to come home and help us with our homework? And I'd be like, yes, I'll be home right after this one. And then he'd call and say, are you coming home to do dinner? I'd be like, yes, I'm coming home right after this one. And then I'd get that call, are you coming home to tuck us into bed? Yes, I'll be home right after this one. And by that time, she had needed to fix dinner and whatnot for her family, and I had gone to the bar. And I got to tell you, every single time I said yes right after this one, I meant it. I wanted to go home right after this one. I wanted nothing more than to be a good wife and a good mom. But I could not, because I have alcoholism. And for those who don't know the 3 pieces of alcoholism, I have a spiritual disconnect. It doesn't matter that I grew up in church. It doesn't matter that I believe in God. It doesn't matter that I was church mama, for crying out loud. They said that church wouldn't run without me. I have a spiritual disconnect. I have no relationship with this God that I think, is there. And so because of that, when I have that mental obsession, I got nothing bigger than that mental obsession. And so I take a drink, whether I want to or not. And because I have the physical allergy that once I start, I can't stop, I don't get to go home and be the good mom and the good wife that I want to be. I beat myself up for years thinking I chose alcohol and drugs over my children. I did not. Alcoholism chose it for me. We have lost the power of choice in drink. So funny, the first time I went through that with my sponsor, I thought it said, I have lost the power of choice in what I will drink. I can guarantee you I will not drink anisette. And I can guarantee you I will never ever again drink a Rainier beer. She says, no, it does not say in what you drink. It says in whether you're going to or not. And a weight was lifted off my heart. I got to be forgiven for choosing alcohol over my kids. So anyway, people start talking about my drink, and that friend I went to on her deck every day, and the people I was drinking with in the bar and whatnot, they all started talking about my drink, and they're all saying, shouldn't you go home? You got 5 kids and a husband. And so the drinking's got to go, because I absolutely rely on what you say to judge how I feel about myself. And so the drinking's got to go. But I need a sufficient substitute. And my kids don't need me so much anymore, and we're drifting so far apart, and my job at the church is fabulous and all that, but I've gotten to where, my job is counting the collections on Monday, and sometimes I'd take some out and put an IOU in because my drinking got kind of expensive, and I'd need it to buy a gallon of milk, but, then come payday, I'd put it back, and I'd take the IOU back out, and, it just got to be this horrendous circle of hiding what I was doing, and so the drinking's got to go. So I started using that white powder instead. And here's one thing I can tell you, it does not give me the sense of ease and comfort I get at once by taking a few drinks, but it'll do. When you are needing to stop drinking because of what other people are saying, it'll do. But here's how I know the difference. Now, I did enough of it, I ended up getting addicted to it, but this is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am 100% an alcoholic. But here's the thing I know, and this is why I know that. So I'm restless, irritable, and discontent, and I take a drink. I'm not anymore. I am not restless. I'm not irritable, and I am as content as can be. When I am restless, irritable, and discontent and I do some dope, I just don't care. And that's how I know the difference. It worked for a while until it didn't anymore. A drink always worked. I am sorry for you people who drank so long that a drink quit working for you. It always worked for me. And I'm kind of grateful the drugs came into my story, because they got me here so much faster than the alcohol by itself would have. Because here's the deal, the money I started taking out of that collection started being more and more, because I'm sorry, dope's a lot more expensive than alcohol, and I can't walk into a bar and bat my pretty blues and get you to buy me a quart gram a crank, it just isn't going to happen. And so it got to the point where, my paychecks weren't big enough to put it all back and do what I needed to do with my paychecks. And so I started saving the envelopes with the amount written on it that I had taken. And by the time it all came about, I had a big black garbage bag full, and it was almost $10,000. And I got pulled aside at work one day from the priest, and he said, Moe, we've got checks bouncing. What happened to the deposits? Well, I was depositing the checks. I couldn't do anything with those, but the cash was all going to me. And so, needless to say, I got fired from that perfect job. And he had been knowing something was going on and trying to help me. I'm slinging dope out the back door of the parish house, for gosh sake. He knew something was going on. Yeah. He didn't know, AA was something in my little hometown that was very hush-hush. I went back to a meeting, my home group up in Billings. We'd go to the little outlying towns and just, kind of support their meetings. And I went back, and I was amazed at who was in those meetings. I had no idea. They kind of knew about me, but, because that all became in a very small town, my poor family. The guilt and the shame, because it all came out, it was pretty ugly. And so my drinking and using got more and more. I did try to do some outpatient treatment for a while, and I just couldn't. My counselor was an overeater. Didn't get it, It got so darned uncomfortable in my skin. I had to do something. And so I went back to drinking and drugging, and so far no charges had been brought. They were trying to figure out what they were going to do with me, and I don't know it, but he's filing for divorce under the table, because he's got to protect himself and those kids from whatever comes of that. And I'm just making it worse and worse all the time. And I decide everybody's just better off without me. And so I leave to go to one of my outpatient classes or whatever, and I spend 2 days trying to figure out how I'm going to kill myself without hurting somebody, because I'm so thoughtful of others. There's no selfishness and self-centeredness here. My first thought was go drive to as far as I could go and find a tall bridge and drive off of it. But then you'd have this cost of transporting my body back, and I'd already done our finances in pretty hard. So I'm just trying to think, and finally I decide I'm just going to rent a motel room and take as many pills as I can. And so I write the maid a apology letter, because she's the one that's going to find my body, and because I'm thoughtful like that. And so then I get my kids' pictures out, and I lay them across the bed, and I'm trying to write them letters so they don't think Mom didn't love them. And I decide I can't do it. Well, by this time I've already taken so many pills, I'm afraid it's going to do what it was supposed to do. And so I called him, and he's like, I'm 50 miles away. What am I supposed to do? My folks lived in Billings, so he called my folks. They called the cops. They came and brought an ambulance and took me to the emergency room and pumped my stomach, and I ended up in the psych ward for a few days, and he wouldn't let me come home, and when I did come home, it was like, it was just so uncomfortable, and I'm trying to be clean and sober because that's what I need. I know in my heart that's what I need. I need to not, I don't know why, I just know that I got to leave this stuff alone, and pretty soon I'm back at it as hard as I was before. I'm going to those outpatient treatment classes but really I'm going to my dope dealer's house or to the bar. And finally one night they're just better off without me. And so I just left in the middle of the night. I didn't tell anyone where I was going or what I was doing. And honestly, my intention was I was going to go to my folks' house. And I was going to get a job, and I was going to pay all that money back that I had stolen from the church. I was going to make him fall in love with me again, and I was going to be that wife and mom that I always wanted to be. And somehow I ended up at my dope dealer's house, and for the next 6 weeks, they didn't know if I was dead or alive. The trips to jail started, in the beginning it was pretty minor stuff, 30 days for shoplifting, 30 days for paraphernalia, whatever, and then finally I get busted with some on me, and I ended up getting out OR on my own recognizance, and I just can't not, I don't know what else to do. I don't know I'm an alcoholic, so I'm doing all this drug stuff, and it's getting uglier and uglier and uglier, and I'm living on the streets, and I'm living in my car, and I'm couch surfing wherever I can, and those trips to jail were really just enough to get me rested up to go out and do it some more. It just, oh my gosh, it got so ugly, and I ended up getting hooked up with some people who needed my good computer skills. I had made beautiful bulletins and beautiful wedding and programs and whatnot, and that served me very well in making beautiful payroll checks on accounts that existed but didn't exist, and I don't know where they got these numbers from. I don't know a lot about it. I just know I was practicing, and I got busted. So my sobriety date is December 3rd, so is my belly button birthday. I would like to say I woke up that morning and thought, I think I'll get sober for my birthday. But that is not what happened. I was having the party to end all parties. I was going to be the hostess with the mostest, and I got busted buying the party favors. So I end up in the Walmart parking lot with about 20 cops and their guns pointed at me, and I'm laying on the ground. Well, one of the people I had been running with had gotten busted the day before, and they decided to put me as the head of all of this stuff we were doing, and because I had the computer skills, I guess, and they put a $100,000 bond on my head and called me the head of this big drug forgery ring, and they really had me bigger and better than I really was. And I kind of ate it up for a little bit until I realized this was not serving me well. A $100,000 bond, nobody was going to be bonding me out. And so, I got to a point, couldn't manipulate my way out of this one like I had all the other ones. It was not looking like 30 days. I had 6 felony charges pending, and man, it looked pretty hopeless. And after about 5 months, I just hit this point of I don't know what to do. Now, I told you I was raised in church. I was raised with God. But I think for the very first time that night, I said an honest prayer, and I don't even know if I knew I was praying, but I simply said, God, I don't know what to do. And there were some people bringing church into the jail, and you guys, I'm the girl that stole money from God. How do you go to church? How do you go to services? How do you do any of that? But they were singing songs I remembered singing in Sunday school as a little girl, and so I went, and the pastor started telling me about this sober house up in Livingston, which was about 150 miles away, and I'm sitting here, I'd love to, but I've got a $100,000 bond on my head. You got 10 grand and a bail bondsman to get me out, and I hadn't been able to get my attorney to get a hold of me. I hadn't been able to get a bond reduction hearing, and literally within days, they realized I wasn't who they thought I was, and my bond got dropped to $2,500. My folks said if I went and lived in this sober house, they'd bond me out. And the gal that managed the whole thing, she said, we usually have a whole application process, but they let me go talk to her on the phone, which is kind of a no-no, but they did. And she says, are you done? I said, I really, really want to be. She says, all right, we've got a bed for you. So, I mean, literally from the time I said, God, I don't know what to do, it was like 2 weeks, and I'm in this sober house, and I'm going to all these meetings, and this little town only had like 2 NA meetings a week, so I'm going to a lot of AA because they required a meeting every day, and man, I just started gravitating away from those NA meetings and into AA meetings. I couldn't have told you why at the time. Now I know I was hearing my message in the AA meetings. But, I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't, none of that. And I was white knuckling it. I was 9.5 months sober and starting to build that relationship with my kids back. Obviously, he divorced me while I was in jail. Go figure. And but I'm starting to build that relationship with my kids just a little bit. And my daughter was cheerleading at the homecoming game, and so I had met this guy in the sober house. He took me to Roundup to watch my daughter cheerlead for homecoming, and the cops came up to me and they said, Mo, let's go out in the parking lot. We don't want to do this in front of your kids. Because, of course, these are guys I grew up with. And so we go out in the parking lot and they arrest me. And I don't even know what they're charging me with. They were something from Billings. They didn't even know. They were waiting on the facts to see what they were charging me with. But he was at the game, my ex. And the warrants had gone to my old address, and he had called the cops and said, she's here. And so I end up with a couple of more felonies. It was all older than the other stuff, and just the way things happened, because I'm a ward of the state, but I'm in the county jail, and they don't like that. And so next thing I know, they're rolling me up and taking me to prison. And I'm like, but I've got a year clean and sober. I was demanding drug tests and all this stuff, and they're like, this is all old stuff, old. But, man, and once you get into prison, it ain't so easy to get out. I made a color-coded timeline for my judge and my case manager and the county attorney and trying to get them to understand I don't belong here. All of this stuff is older. I've already been sentenced on the newer stuff and the more wicked stuff. But anyway, so I end up in there and man, that was rough. That was rough. It took me to a place of hopelessness again because I was starting to build a new life that felt pretty good, and it felt like everybody there was just biding their time until they could get out and do it again. And I don't want to do it again. I don't want to. Hit this place of desperation one more time that I'm saying, God, I don't know what to do. I've been watching we used to get our razors on Wednesday evenings, and so we didn't become fur balls. And I got to where I was watching which officers really looked at the razor when you put it back in the container. See if maybe I could slip that blade out of there. It just got hopeless again. I went before the parole board. And because I didn't have a solid parole plan, I gave them 3 options. I'd really like this, but if you feel you must, I'll do this. And if you absolutely insist, I'll do the whole pre-release thing and everything. But so they flopped me for 2 more years. They said I had to do 2 more years, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt I would not make it 2 more years. I would go absolutely insane in there. And so one more time, I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. And within 2 weeks, I had been invited to join the Intensive Challenge Program, which is a 4-month intense treatment program, and then go straight to pre-release afterwards instead of having to do inmate worker like they were wanting me to do. And I do that 4-month, and man, when they say intense, they mean intense. It was 4:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night. It was classes and classes and classes, and I learned. But here's the problem: it's a state-run program, so there's no God. So I'm doing step 1, step 4, step 5, step 9. And no God in it. So really all I'm doing is discovering what a piece of crap I really am. What a piece of work I had become. And so I get out of there and I go to this pre-release center, and he came. He had waited for me. Of course, he spent a lot of that time in treatment because his dad went to prison and he drank again. And he came and proposed to me in the lobby of the pre-release center in front of all the other girls. And don't that make me feel like something? But here's the deal. In the first 7 days, you can't go anywhere unless you go on a staff transport. Now, mind you, I had been going to meetings while I was in prison. There was a group of women that brought meetings in, but I heard them talking about their home group, and I was not going to go there because they told you what to do, when to do it, where to do it, and how to do it, and I just spent 3 years of that. Thank you very much. So I'm out. I go down to Family Services to get some clothes, and I had a cigarette. I was a smoker. I had just spent 3 years without a cigarette. Not my idea, thank you very much. And I wanted another one. So I signed up for this staff transport to go to an AA meeting. Now, mind you, I still don't know I'm an alcoholic. I got 8 felonies that prove to you I'm a drug addict, but I have no idea I'm an alcoholic because I hadn't really drank much for the last, 2 years of my out there-ness. And so I sign up, and guess where they took me? Yep. It went to that meeting, and there was a woman in there that had been, now my very first AA meeting ever was in jail. I'd like to say I went because I knew I had a problem. I did not. I knew I was broke, and this chick was going to buy me some coffee if I cornrowed her hair, and she was going to the AA meeting, and so I went and stood behind her and cornrowed her hair. And I don't remember anything that was said at that meeting, but I remember the woman that brought the meeting in, and she literally bounced into the cell, into the unit. And I remember thinking, she might be sober, but she's on something. Ain't nobody that happy coming in here. I don't care if you do get to leave after an hour. Well, she was at that first AA meeting they took me to when I got to pre-release, and she chased me out the door afterwards, yelling at me, asking me if I had a sponsor, and I said, no, not yet. But I knew I had to get one because my case manager had mentioned it. I really didn't know what that meant, and she said, well, I'll be your sponsor. And she says, we'll start meeting every Tuesday at 4:15 at Denny's, because I wasn't allowed to go to anybody's house or anything. So, God, I had no idea. And thank God when I'm Moe and I'm addicted. That's how I'd introduce myself at meetings. And thank God, nobody said you can't be here, because they were, most of them were closed meetings. And nobody ever said you can't be here. And she started taking me through the book. And by the time we got to page, I think it's 43 or whatever it is, a light bulb was coming on. Because she told me, forget about the drugs. Think back to when you drank. I can't stop once I start. She had me make a list of all the times. Holy cow, that went fast. She had me make a list of all the times that I drank more than I intended to. I said, but Angela, that's every single time. And she said, exactly. So I do that. Long story short, I have gotten to repair so many relationships. My folks went through hell. I invited them to my 10-year talk. They said, we don't want to come. We lived it. Need to hear it again. We lived it. So, I got to be at both of their bedsides when they died. I have gotten to totally become mom to my kids again. I have 10 grandkids. 3 of them are less than 3 months old. Yeah, this Grammy's been busy the last few months. My daughter, that it took 7 years for her to decide she was willing to try to have a relationship with me, she now says, you've always been there for me. You're my rock. You're the one who never judges me. I'm like, did you forget that, 4 or 5 years? Doesn't matter. I have been married and divorced 2 more times, once to that. When they say don't get in a relationship when you're newly sober, they're right. They are so right. But then I married a guy in sobriety. I had 7 years, he had 14, and at 18 years he had to raise his hand, and he could not get sober again. And the Al-Anons may have the dubious luxury of whether he's drinking or not. I do not. because I just kept getting sicker and sicker, and I knew it was only a matter of time until a drink sounded good to me too. And so I had to, he now has a year sober. So something worked. Last time I was up in Montana, we did his ninth step. I said, I don't need this, but I know you do, so let's hear it. I now am with a normie, which is kind of weird. He's got 9 years without a drink. He had a motorcycle accident and just quit. I just switched to Dr. Pepper. Well, I just switched to methamphetamine. He does not need a sufficient substitute. I do. But we have a relationship that is phenomenal because for once in my life, I got into a relationship when I have some emotional sobriety and I don't need him to do anything to make me feel okay. You know, we love to ride motorcycles and just be. You know, he loves the speaker meetings, regular meetings, he kind of glazes over and, you know, he doesn't get it. And that's okay. He doesn't have to. He knows how important this is for me. I get to be an active, good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I coordinate a speaker meeting down in Tempe. It's called Get in the Car. It's this Saturday, 7 p.m., 2222 South Price Road. Come on down. We fly in speakers from all over. It's a great time. There's an energy in the room that you just don't find everywhere. My home group is the Happy Valley group in North Phoenix. We meet on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock. Yes, I am missing my home group. Come and join us. We're at 39th Avenue and Happy Valley Road at the Foothills Christian Church. We have a fabulous meeting with a lot of really good structure. There are 3 sides to the triangle. There are 3 parts to alcoholism, and there are 3 parts to recovery. We have the spiritual malady, the mental obsession, and the spiritual malady, the mental obsession, and the physical allergy. We also have unity, recovery, and service. There are 3 pieces to our recovery, and if you are not doing all 3 pieces, get busy. Recovery is your program, the first 164 pages of the book. Unity is your meetings, your meeting after the meeting, your coffee, your dinners, your movies, your barbecues, whatever. And service is anything you are doing to keep the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous open for the people behind you. It takes all 3. I didn't practice all 3 in the beginning, and I got relief. We will all find relief when we quit drinking. But when you start practicing all 3 legacies, you get freedom. Freedom from the things that made you need to take a drink. If you don't know how to do that, your sponsor hasn't guided you into doing that, talk to some of these old timers. They will show you, and you will get to have freedom too. I didn't have that before I came here, so I think I'll keep coming back. Thanks.